Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking MotoGP with myself, Rob Portman, and Paul Scott in the studio, as always, and everyone in the digital world joining us on YouTube. Already so many people joining us on YouTube. And remember, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're in the Facebook world, again, just hit that like and share. Let's get this message as far and wide as possible. So, Paul, thank you once again for joining me.
Yeah, Rob, absolute pleasure to be here. It's always something that I look so forward to. You always chat to me. I've got a couple of mates. I do a lot of cycling. I've got a couple of mates that have an interest in MotoGP, but not a passion. So, you can't really get into a conversation with them. They're very superficial about it. They'll watch it if they're in front of the TV, where this is like the highlight of MotoGP. We get to study the races on the weekend, and then our little insight, pull it apart on a Tuesday night with so many people joining in to put their input, which what I do on Wednesday morning, because I don't see the comments, I log into the Facebook and YouTube page and I go check all the comments. And I say, I remember Rob reading this and I remember. So it's absolute fantastic and nice to have everyone joining us this evening.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people already putting up some comments. Warwick Evans, evening, guys. What a race Sunday. Our boys had a tough weekend, but made up Sunday. Super proud of them. Dave McBain, deep sea diver, Wade Williams, Dave McBain, Wayne Taylor, Starsky Williams, JP Swiak. Everyone's already joining him from all over the world. Luca Jefferson, Richard Walker, Scott Mordaunt. So evening, everybody, and get yourselves nice and comfortable. Yvonne Pretorius, thank you for joining us. Jacques Smuts, MotoGP is the best sport in the world. And yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, not only what happened on Sunday race day and throughout the weekend, but also leading up to that. And that's where we're going to start the conversation, Paul and everybody. So let's get those comments in. Mike Teal, good evening, guys. Greeting from myself and grandson, Liam Townsend, of course, always tuning into our show. So hello, Mike and Liam. Welcome to the show. Sean Clarsons. How's it, guys? What a race. We're going to start off with news that broke just before the race weekend at Le Mans started. And then there's, of course, these 2027 rules now. Been mixed kind of emotion with it. My initial reaction was, I think pretty much like everyone's, why, and it's going backwards, and you got to slap yourself and keep reminding yourself that we're always ones going less aero, less this. Yet these rules come out almost to the script that we wanted to, and then we all throw our toys out the cot. And I think there's two sides of the story. It's because MotoGP is just thriving at the moment. So you almost like, why would you change? Don't fix something that's not broken. There's that old saying, and MotoGP is thriving, so why would we want to change it? But on the other hand, there's this excitement of, okay, well, it's almost a reset in some ways for the championship, which is, always an exciting thing because it just throws a curveball in, and, which manufacturer is going to bring out the best bike, which rider is going to adapt the best. So there's pros and cons to it. I look at it and I listened to what Simon Crafar said about it over the weekend, and I think he pretty much got it spot on. The exact same kind of sentiments as I certainly felt as, going that 800cc route. Oh no, what are you doing? But then it's actually going to be a good thing. I like the reduction of the aero. I like the ride height device and the launch devices. I like that's gone. I've enjoyed watching it. Don't get me wrong. It's brought a really cool certain bit of aspect, but I think it's just going to freshen things up to allow. I mean, look, this was brought in to kind of slap Ducati on the wrist. Ducati, you've got too big, you've got too good. We need to bring you back and give Yamaha and them a chance. But, can it only be a good thing, or are we tainting something that's already so good?
Well, Rob, the worry which Simon Crafar did mention, and also when I read the new regulations, the first thing I thought about was back in the day, whenever it was 26 to 27, 2006 to 2007, I think was the change from 1000cc to 800. And it didn't work. No matter what anyone says. And what did they run it for? I think 3 seasons, and then back to 1000cc. So straight away that crossed my mind. But then something Simon mentioned, which I'm sure you heard him say, with those rules, the only limiting factor had to be an 800cc. Irrespective of what you did with the bore and stroke, where now everybody has to have the same bore. So in my mind, and I'm not a technical guy at all, surely then everyone has to have the same stroke, because your bore is the same. Where if I've got a smaller bore, I can have a longer stroke, or vice versa. Now everyone's the same. The idea being that what they're trying to do, one of the reasons is because it's got so fast. And let's be quite honest, it's not a car that's got a built-in roll cage, carbon fiber structures all around it to protect you. When you do crash, you and your machine are either separated or you're going together, but there's nothing to protect you. And I think that's probably only a small part of the reason, but it's definitely one of the reasons. The aero, I think, fantastic. I'd even be happy if they got rid of more of the aero, but it's also got its advantages because we're seeing such good racing. And no matter what anyone says, the racing has been good, even with all the aero. Yeah, and then the electronics, and please tell me if I misunderstood it. It sounds like the electronics, everybody's going to have access to everybody's information, not just team for team. So, for example, Brad Binder can see what Jorge Martin was doing on the weekend. That's how I'm interpreting it. And that, to me, good or bad, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence here, because when you've got a little bit of an advantage as a Ducati rider or a KTM rider, whatever it is it now fair that you've put in something that no one else has? Now you're sharing it, but vice versa. If you're at the back of the queue, so let's take Taka Nakagami as an example, might benefit him. So I don't know, that I'm on the fence for, but I think generally, yeah, maybe we've got to give it a go. It's happening. The other thing that Gigi D'Aligno mentioned is, can they have a freeze on bikes for 2026? Because they don't want to develop bikes in 2026, and they know there's new bikes coming in 2027, which are completely different. But is this now playing into Yamaha's hands? And did Quartararo know that? And what about Honda going forward? Are they now going to say, well, you know what? We've got 2.5 years where we probably aren't going to be good enough to win on these. Let's just concentrate on the new bike. And when we drop the 2027 bike, it must be a class leader immediately. So there could be some really good positives coming out of this.
Yeah, and a couple of comments here, Little Big Media Co. and some others saying the problem with the new rules is that World Superbike will be faster, so will need to be slowed down. So expect World Superbikes to become more stock rules, which already a lot of people have, or a lot of media agencies have come out and saying that World Superbikes will go more stock. So pretty much that bike that you buy off the showroom floor, which, let's be honest, these days you're buying a World Superbike off the showroom floor anyway. You're just changing the forks and one or two other things. So there's going to be changes, which, as I said, it's, there's going to be positives, there's going to be negatives. I don't think it's going to affect the show too much, in sense of, I think the racing's still going to be good because we've got these super talented riders that are fitter and faster than they've ever been. Michelin tires, again, I take my hat off to Michelin tires again on the weekend. They went 14 or 15 seconds faster overall in the race with Martin. They allowed the Marc Marquez to pull the stupid moves that he did from miles back, and the guys are going faster and faster and faster. And as you said, I think one of the main ideas were that, and one of the messages from MotoGP is safer. And it is that, the tracks, they can't expand the tracks anymore. They can't expand the air fences and all these kind of things anymore. So the only way to really control the environment is by slowing the riders down a little bit. The big talking point, I think, is exactly what you just mentioned with Gigi D'Aligno, is now commitment-wise. Honda and Yamaha know, right, now what do we do? It's already come out that Honda have said, right, we're scrapping everything. We're focusing on a bike for 2027, which I think is a great idea. But you're going to have 2 years of just you are going to finish stone last. You are already, so are you missing that much? But you're going to have riders that are mentally okay with the fact that you're going to race meetings to not compete, to test. And it's going to be good testing, it's going to be bad testing. So that question mark of, right, how much do manufacturers now commit to it? Because why would a Ducati, a KTM want to spend another 1 million, 2 million euros of development over the next 2 years on a bike that's not going to exist? So I agree with that, freezing the bikes, right? Whatever bikes you have for 2025, that's it. 2026, you cannot make any changes, no changes, none whatsoever. That bike that you run is the bike that you run. And the Marks and them have proved it, riding the old spec bikes. Yeah, there's missing a little bit, but you can still compete. So you don't need this leaps and bounds kind of change. I suppose the big question here is, Honda have kind of already put their cards on the table saying we're going to kind of look forward and build a bike for 2027. Does Yamaha go that same route? I remember years ago in the 500 class, Yamaha brought out that twin 400cc bike that competed in the 500 class, trying to, lighter chassis and that different. And they tried it in race conditions, and some tracks it worked, some tracks it didn't. So are Honda and Yamaha going to be brave enough to start doing that, literally bringing out an 800 version of their current bike and race it in the conditions? Is it that simple of taking the current chassis, putting an 800cc engine in it, reducing the wings, taking the ride height device and all that off and going riding? I mean, this is the can of worms that has been opened by these rule changes.
Yeah, and it's something that I think, look, it was only announced last week. Officially, I'm presuming everybody's been in negotiations and bun fights for probably the whole of this season. But yeah, those are the decisions that the factories are going to have to make. I think it's quite a harsh thing for guys like KTM and Aprilia, who over the last 2 years have certainly closed the gap to Ducati, where maybe Honda and Yamaha haven't managed that. Now, well, is it going to mean that everyone starts on a level playing field? KTM and Aprilia putting in so much work. Ducati, we've discussed ad nauseum over the last 5 years, all the work they've put in since De Aligno went there in 2014. They're benefiting from now. Look, I still think they're going to produce a bike that they're reducing the engine size. It's going to be slightly narrower, which we know. Or Yamaha going to go now with a different, or they're going to choose a V4 versus an inline. This is their opportunity to make that change if they deem it necessary. But I still think at the end of the day, the formula that Ducati are using now works. They'll tweak it to work just as well, but it's a chance for everyone to catch up because, as I said, it's going to be a brand new playing field. And I think it's such a drastic change that you will be able to produce a completely brand new bike and be competitive.
I think it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, it's all those emotions bundled in one. So, let's see how it all plays out. It's certainly going to play a little bit more of a level playing field, but it's certainly an opportunity for the likes of Yamaha and Honda to certainly catch up. So let's see how it all plays out. Let's get into the race weekend that was Le Mans. Fantastic, and hats off to the whole French public who came out again. Biggest spectacle again. Jerez was fantastic, and you thought, geez, how are you going to beat that? The French came out and they just demolished it. They went one up on last year's event, and it just looked like a fantastic atmosphere once again. Zarco and Quartararo really have got the biggest fan base there, but just passionate supporters, and was fantastic to see. Sprint race was one of the more boring sprint races of the year, so we're not going to dive too much into that, but certainly the Sunday main race, there was a lot of talking points. Now, the biggest thing I took out of the Sunday main race is we watched 3 phenomenal motorcycle riders put on one of the finest displays of skill, determination, mental strength, maturity, racecraft, all those fantastic things that make the ultimate sportsman. They just put it out there on the line. It was fantastic to watch the speed and the skill that those riders, Martin, Marquez, and Bagnaia, and the rest of the field, but in particular those 3, because that was the main focus of the race, obviously, was just phenomenal. I sat on the edge of my seat. I couldn't believe that the pace that they were running and the passes they were making, especially the Mark and that. So, and Martin made a big statement this weekend. He said it afterwards. I am the fastest rider. Today, I am the fastest rider. Surely now, Paul, surely we are looking at potential MotoGP champion. We've spoken about it in length, but he proved once again that there's something has changed in Martin. Slapped himself after Jerez and put it right here. And we're surely looking at the second of the factory Ducati riders alongside Pecco Bagnaia next year.
Well, he would certainly deserve it, 100%. The curveball being thrown into the court at the moment is obviously Marc Marquez, and exactly what he said, Marquez, and what Simon Crafar reiterated many times. Marc brings the show. Love him or hate him, irrespective. He brings the show. Mm-hmm. So if you, as Ducati, are hoping that Pecco next year is going to be your world champion again, regardless of where he finishes this year, he's your main focus. Marquez is going to bring you all the attention that you need. Martin, on the other hand, isn't going to bring that kind of attention. But if you're looking, and Simon said it, Friday afternoon in that practice session, he was saying, if it was my choice, I'd be putting Marc Marquez on the bike. Sunday, he said, without a doubt, you've got to put Jorge Martin on that bike because he's the best rider. He was from qualifying, from practice 1 till the end of the race, he was the fastest guy. I think there were 10 laps in the race where he didn't lead. He was superb, didn't put a foot wrong. And let's be quite honest, Rob, it's bike racing. We've got another 15 rounds. We'll see what happens with Kazakhstan. So let's say 15 rounds left. each one of those three is going to crash at least once in a main race. It's
Yeah.
going to happen. It's bike
Yeah.
racing.
At this
So
level.
take that. Don't, we criticized Martin last week because we said the pressure got to him. Exactly what you said now. Here we had for this weekend, the three fastest on each other for the last 10 laps. Okay, Mark rode very well to get across to them, closed the 2-second gap. But when the three of them were together, the pressure, the skill, the determination, exactly what you said, man, I don't think I've ever seen better. You'll see one race where someone like Maverick 2 races ago was outstanding. But these are the same three guys every single weekend with the pressure, with the skill, with the drive, determination. Yeah, it was absolutely at the top draw, that race.
Okay, I must apologize to Charmaine, who's just shouted at me. Mr. Rob, if you pronounce Jerez wrong one more time, my TV is going to have a fork in it. My Spanish students will have to teach you. It's Jerez, it's Jerez, it's Jerez, as they say here in the UK. Charmaine, I'm sorry. Jerez. Or tell me, well, you can't tell me how to say it, but I know it's Jerez. Paul, this is the funny point, because now Constantiotis, sorry, I never know how to say your surname. He's gone and said, yeah, Ducati won't choose Martin and they will stay at factory outfit next year. And this is the thing. There's still this on the fence about whether Martin's going to the factory ride. Bastianini then goes factory Aprilia. Marc Marquez fits into not Pramac, because Pramac potentially going to Yamaha, but staying with Cressini, but with that Pramac factory Ducati support. So basically, Marc Marquez is going to be a factory Ducati rider on the latest spec bike, factory Ducati contract in Cressini colors. But you could see it going any which one of those ways. But surely, I mean, if Ducati overlook Martin, it'll be the biggest slap in the face in the history of motorsport. So I see this playing out exactly like that. I see Martin going into the factory team alongside Pecco Bagnaia. The biggest handbrake there or discussion that goes on between them is the Monster Energy versus Red Bull sponsorship deal. I see Enea Bastianini going to factory Aprilia in place of Alessio Spargo, and I see Marc Marquez staying in the Cressini environment. You look, and what made me really think that after the race weekend is you look how Marc celebrated with that Cressini team. You look at Nadia Padovani coming out saying, we are not under no circ, 100% not talking to Yamaha. Or Pramac are still kind of not saying too much. Cressini have said, we are not. Now, for Marc, personally, yeah, I think he wouldn't mind going to the factory Ducati team, but I think at this stage of his career where he's starting to get the smiley, happy face back, and he's loving life. You can see Marc Marquez is loving life again. He's reborn. Marc Marquez is reborn, but he's reborn in that environment, an environment which in many ways he can control. It's Marc Marquez in the Cressini team. It's not factory Ducati with Marc Marquez. So if he just gets that factory bike, which is what he wants, and the factory money, which is what he wants, I think he'll quite happily stay in that Cressini team, because then when he beats the factory guys, he's still that independent rider beating the factory boys, which Martin at the moment's loving, but okay, he's over that now. Now he wants the title of full factory rider. So I can see it playing more out like that, but at the same time, I can see it playing out as Ducati going, you know what, Jorge, we love you and thank you. You are the fastest man, brilliant, but no one shouts at us. No one tells us what to do. So you go, and there's only really Yamaha or Honda and Aprilia really the options, which you're not going to get the money that you want. But Ducati that brave to do? Ducati have chopped Lorenzo too early. Ducati have chopped Stoner. Rossi have left Ducati. So I don't know. I can see it playing out so many ways. I think the safe bet is Martin, Bagnaia, Cressini, Marc Marquez, and Alex Marquez, and Enea Bastianini factory Aprilia.
Yeah, I think that would be scenario number one. I also, in my head, I keep chopping and changing. My concern with Martin is 2 years ago when he didn't get the ride, he had a wobbler. Last year when he didn't get the ride, he had a wobbler. He's bad-mouthed. I won't say Ducati direct. He's voiced his displeasure at them not choosing him in very harsh terms. And if you go back to, and I know now we're going back 2007, 2008, Stoner said, nobody tells Ducati what to do. I'm presuming since then till now, they've had a lot of management change, structure change. So maybe things are different and maybe they do look at things differently. But if you go by what Stoner said 15 years ago, Ducati are going to tell Martin to take his paycheck and take a hike, because his attitude is he's going almost against them. Once again, he's been very vocal in saying, if I don't get the factory right, there are other people who want me. He's being very outspoken for someone who he hasn't been declined the ride yet. So I think I don't know if it's him or his management. That's what worries me with him. I think he says the wrong thing at the wrong time. Instead of just his riding is showing 100%, he should be on that bike, no doubt. Your scenario of him and Pecco on the two factory Ducatis, Mark staying with Grassini on a factory bike, I think that is for everybody the best scenario, even for Mark. I think that's what he would want. He's very happy. And as I said last time we chatted, Rob, his brother's not a factor either way. And as I still stick to my belief, his brother never worries about whether he beats Mark or Mark beats him. He just wants to beat everyone else. So if they're in the same team, their little family bond is still together. The question I have to throw into the hat now is, what if Pramac don't go with Yamaha? Do they still get the factory bike and then Mark doesn't? That's a question there. Because look, that Campanotti said he's going to let them know the last day he can make a decision is the end of July. And he said he's not making a decision or making the decision announced till that day. So that to me could be the spanner in the works. That's the only thing. I think your scenario of Pecco and Martin, I like that. Bastianini to Aprilia probably be good for him. And Mark and Alex stay where they are, but Mark gets a full factory. Exactly what Martin has got right now. Same contract. I think that to me would be scenario number one. I would feel desperately sorry for Enea Bastianini, because I don't know if he deserves to be dropped. Maybe, well, there won't be another Ducati. Or do they move Alex out and put him on that bike? If Grassini now get two factory bikes. So a difficult one. I don't think Mark will allow that to happen. My opinion. He'll say, if I'm staying at Grassini, my brother stays at Grassini. But there will be a ride at Aprilia, I believe, for Bastianini.
Yeah, it's a big question mark, and this is how good MotoGP is. Heading into the weekend, the big talk was the four Ducatis, mainly the three: Martin, Marquez, and Bastianini. And how do they finish Sunday's race? Martin, Marquez, Bagnaia, Bastianini. And Bastianini, I mean, we'll talk about him just now, was the fastest rider on that track the last couple of laps. Watching it again now, the guy came from nowhere to close, and he had a long lap. There was a lot going against him, and he was actually the fastest rider on that track. But anyway, in the Martin conversation, I think, as you said, the big holding back factor at the moment is the decision from Pramac. If they go Yamaha, it's actually an easier decision for them to make. The biggest decision then for Pramac to make certainly is their riders. Morbidelli in particular, does now he go, oh, for God's sake, now I'm on Yamaha again, and what happens there? But as Jaden Sneyman says, you don't need a factory bike, but you need the latest spec bike. Martin has proved that with Pramac. Pedro Acosta has now proved that in the Gas team. And that's where I think the mentality of Marc Marquez would and should be, is that, I don't care what colors I'm in, just give me that latest spec bike, because there is that 10th or 2/10 of the second that you're missing out on. Give me that latest spec bike. And, I'm quite happy in this Grassini environment, and you can see it. It's there for everyone to see. So listen, that's a big question that I think we're going to be talking about until that July deadline comes, of who's going to go where. Firmin Aldeguer, we know he's moving up from Moto2 to MotoGP. He needs a Ducati ride. Ducati have signed him, promised him a bike. Okay, well, where does he go now if Pramac's not going to sign with Ducati, as a lot of people have mentioned here? So, let's see how that happens. But Martin, flawless, spectacular throughout the whole weekend. He dominated the sprint race again. I loved the Nick Harris podcast or blog that he puts on the MotoGP side. He's become the Usain Bolt of MotoGP. He's just he just dominates sprints, and that's why the sprint race was boring in the sense of there was no real passing, and Martin made it boring. But you just watch how Martin can make that bike go so fast, and how he hangs off, and then those pictures of him scraping his elbow and his head, and it's just fantastic to watch. That's why it's hard to say the sprint race was boring, from a racing action point of view. But I could sit and watch Martin ride a bike like that all day long. So Martin, fantastic. It's his championship to lose in my mind. In my mind, Martin is going to have, as you said, those one or two mistakes, but so is Pecco, so is Marc Marquez, so is Bastianini, so is Brad Binder, so is all the riders. I think ultimately Jorge Martin, with that hunger, that desire, that I'm going to prove you wrong. I think the defining moment will be that if he does sign for the factory team, does he then kind of let loose a bit, that hunger, that determination? Okay, well, I've got the factory Ducati right now. Now I don't have to prove a point as much. Those are all the kind of things that we're going to have to wait and see with Martin. Moving to second place with Marc Marquez, who the love affair is almost starting again with Marc Marquez, because, as I said, we're seeing this reborn Marc. It's like he's re-entered the MotoGP World Championship. So we're getting to relive this Marc Marquez, and I find myself going onto the Marc Marquez fan page to want to subscribe, and you know what I mean. It's you're kind of bought into the whole Marc Marquez thing again. What I was so impressed with Marc Marquez is that the weekend started shockingly. Q2, 13th on the grid, he looked lost on that Ducati on the Friday and the Saturday. He looked lost up until that sprint race. They found something. Then for him to come out on Sunday, and again, didn't start the race that well. He seems to have this nervousness about starting on a Ducati with a full tank of fuel. And he said he's very edgy and tight and, not loose. Then he closes the gap on the two fastest riders in the world at the moment, racing each other around Le Mans, pushing each other to the absolute limit, and Marc Marquez just closes that gap and then comes from miles back to put a move on the inside of Pecco Bagnaia, miles back. I mean, I was going, right, that's it. Marc Marquez, you idiot. This is what happens. You force me to love you, then you go take out the champ again, and then I'm going to hate you. Then he pulls the bike in, makes the apex, flicks it, and goes and finishes second. And I'm like, but how does that happen? A big thing for me was after the race when Marc Marquez celebrated his second luck, he had won again. But then the praise that he gave that bike of his, pointing at his bike, hugging his bike, saying that, you know what, I just pushed you to the limit and beyond, and you kept me on, you took me to second place. I absolutely love you, my Gresini Ducati. So I loved the whole Marc Marquez exercise this past weekend. I loved his interview. I loved everything that he did. He didn't do any stupid moves. That was the perfect version of Marc Marquez.
Yeah, Rob, which, let's be quite honest, and I'm a Marc Marquez fan through and through, but it's not very often we get to see that Marc Marquez, because just go back 2 weeks ago to, is it Jerez, Spain?
Yeah.
He barged his way through a couple of people there, and then he gets everyone's back up. But you're quite right. And I watched him in that start of the sprint race. And look, a lot of it was luck, but he picked his way inside, outside, to come out of there first corner of the second, third corner in fourth position without touching one person, which is very unlike Marc Marquez. And then the same in the feature race on Sunday. Like you say, he seems a bit cautious for the first 3 or 4 laps, loses 1 or 2 positions. But once whether it's a confidence or he's waiting for the tires to get to what he deems correct temperature, once he settles down, and in this weekend he showed it, he has more skill than 99% of them out there. He picks them off at ease when he's not desperate. He only seems to be desperate, like 2 weeks ago in Spain, where he's made a mistake or he's been punted a little bit. Then he becomes desperate to get back to where he was. Sunday, he seemed to, in his head, he knew he had 28 or 30 laps, whatever it was. One guy every second lap. He was obviously watching the gap to Pecco and Martin to make sure it didn't get too big, but he didn't make any desperate moves. And that, I think, was because with 10 laps to go, he was in third. And as soon as he got to third, he had a little bit of a scrap with Gian Antonio. But once he passed him, he pulled that gap immediately. And then he settled into his rhythm. And yeah, he was absolutely, just showed the skill of the guy. Love him or hate him, he's an 8 times world champion. And without a doubt, he's still got what it takes to battle with the front guys. And I think it was an example of a mature 31-year-old, whatever he is now, world champion, putting his skills to the test when he needed it. And look what happened. I mean, 13th to 2nd in both races after, as you say, on Saturday when he pulled in after Q1, he was a face of fury. And he didn't let it get to him, which is one thing with Marquez. Very seldom does he badmouth anybody. Whether you've punted him or the bike's the bike's cut, he just takes it in his stride. You can see he's not happy, but that's it. And then Sunday, he showed what he's really made of. And I think it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and credit to his team and everyone involved in it. They were able to find solutions, and this is one topic we'll talk about when we talk about Brad and the KTM team a little bit later, is finding those solutions. They were able to do it, and they put on a great ride. As on YouTube here, 17 is the name of the comment. But what about Mark's sprint start? And it was phenomenal, but it wasn't this loose, ragged Mark. It was this controlled, aggressive, but he made it all work. And that's what I loved about the Marc Marquez I saw this weekend, is that he wasn't overriding. Everything was in control. He put those hard but fair moves on, and he didn't do anything stupid. He didn't do anything that, as I said, when he went on the inside of Pecco, I went, Mark, your whole weekend is going to go up in flames. One stupid move. You cannot come, and I've been to Lamar when I went with Shares a couple of years ago for the 24-hour. And it's a go-kart track. It's a narrow. I don't know how those guys get around there so fast. And when Mark went into that corner, which is very narrow, it tightens up. It's one of those corners that suckers you in. You think you can go in faster than you want to, and then it tightens up and you can't, And I just thought, oh, Mark, God, what have you done? I was on your fan club page, and I'm going to kind of delete it. And he pulled it off, and it was spectacular. Mark and the whole team's performance, and I just loved that appreciation Mark showed the bike and the team in many ways afterwards. I loved the celebration with the team afterwards, and I just looked at that and I went, why would he want to leave that environment? Why would he want to go alongside Pecco Bagnaia in Pecco Bagnaia's Ducati team, and then have Gigi and more of a spotlight, all that pressure? You know what? Stay there. So I really love the Marc Marquez exercise from Lamar. Third place, Pecco Bagnaia. Disappointing Saturday. Bad luck on Saturday. Did everything right in qualifying Saturday. And this is the problem, when you have those crashes in the qualifying on your number one bike, there's not enough time now to the sprint race. And this was always going to be the big talking point when sprint races were kind of introduced, is that time and that risk. How much risk do you now put into qualifying and sprint race and an end? And unfortunately, at Pecco Bagnaia, his number one bike, there was something wrong, and he unfortunately had to pull out the race. But I was impressed again with the spirit, the determination, the skill that Pecco Bagnaia showed to come out on Sunday. You just have a morning warm-up. It's a 10-minute warm-up or something, to now this bike that wasn't working on Saturday, try it on Sunday morning, cool, and then go out and trust it fully in a 27-lap sprint race. He did that. He led most of the race. I think he will be a little bit cross with himself, especially watching the race back and how he was passed by Martin. Martin came from a long way back. Pecco was certainly, suffering a little bit with fuel, tires or something. I think he'll be kicking himself with the Martin move and certainly the Marc Marquez move. But I loved, again, the way Pecco would have been swearing in his helmet a bit, takes his helmet off in Parc Ferme, congratulates everyone on the podium, congratulates everyone when the national anthem was sung on the grid. He congratulates the fans, he applauds the fans. Pecco is just the ultimate sportsman to me. Yeah, I know he comes out like he did at Jerez with one or two little, sour points with the Brad move, and that 98% of the time, the guy's just the perfect example of a world champion. And to me, he was humble in defeat when he could have easily thrown his toys out the cot. I was waiting for a throw the toys out the cot moment because it was justified with that kind of move pulled on you on the last lap. When you're attacking Martin and you're lining up Martin, you've done all this hard work, and then a Marc Marquez on a Gresini comes and just cocks your whole race up with one move. But I was impressed with Pecco's recovery and the fact that he was humble in defeat to take the third and know that still a long championship. There's going to be mistakes. The problem with Pecco is now his room for error is now a lot less. Martin's almost got one extra race that he can make an error over Pecco. But Pecco certainly does have to sort Saturdays out now if he wants to be this champion. He can't just rely on Sunday's main races.
Well, definitely Saturdays has been his downfall last year and so far this season. And I know his mindset was always, I don't lose that many points. But he can't keep using that as an excuse now. Just on that point, me personally, when his bike was giving him drama and what he had dropped back to 14th or 15th, then he pulled into the pits. In my thinking straight away was that was the right move. He's not going to get injured now. They can sort the bike out. And what's he going to do? The best he was going to get was 1 point. 1 point's not going to make, maybe stupid thing to say if he loses the championship by 1 point. But he could have also carried on, and whatever was wrong with the bike could have spat him off somewhere and he could have broken a wrist. Then he misses out on, and now we've got next week no race, or this weekend. Then we've got 2 in a row. So you don't want to have anything happen this past weekend. So I think for me, it was a mature decision. He might have been ruining it in his helmet, but you're quite right. Then the main race, I don't think he was expecting Mark to bomb him on the last lap. And by bombing, Mark put a fair, no knocking pass on him, just outbraked him from a long way back. And if you listen to Mark said, when you're racing like we are, if you're not going to attack the guy in front of you, the guy behind you is going to attack you. So you've got to be awake. That's kind of what Mark said. And I don't know if Pecco maybe just lost focus and thought he needs to have a go at Martin and stopped thinking, well, Mark's going to have a go at me, because he certainly didn't try and close the line.
No.
But as you say, then he finished the race, and he's definitely grown on me in terms of he's the consummate professional. He is a deserved world champion. We've discussed it. But like you say, Rob, that pressure has now just moved one little foot closer to him and one little foot further away from Martin, because as you say, it's over a one race points gap now. So Martin's got a little bit of a margin of error. Pecco's got nothing because he's got Marc Marquez breathing up his backside. And don't forget Bastianini, he's still a little way off, but he's going to be good for the rest of the season. He's showing that, as you said, and we'll talk about him now, but fastest towards the end of the race. And he always used to do that. That year he rode for Grassini. How many times did he, last third of a race, he was by far the fastest guy on the track. So it's another spanner in the works towards Pecco Bagnaia retaining this championship.
Yeah, a comment here from Angamali Gypsy UK. I hope I said that right. Mark been through hell the last few years. You should give him the credit he deserves. So inspiring. And listen, that just adds to the flavor of the story. And you know, I find myself watching Mark and I keep having this, you know, reoccurrence of that scene where he's, you know, gets teary and he's talking about his career being over, and then you watch that, and that's what makes the story so much sweeter. So absolutely, Angameli, you're 100% right there. Con, you said the Marc Marquez overtake was clean. Pecco acknowledged this. Absolutely, there was nothing wrong with the Marc Marquez overtake. The fact that he came from so far back, and that's why I think the acknowledgement to that Ducati was. I think Mark, and he said afterwards, I went, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And that Ducati took him through, and that's what the hug and the kiss to that Ducati was after the race, is that you got me through. It was great to see. And Enea Bastianini, let's talk about him, because he's a big name in this whole circus that is the Ducati saga at the moment, and he kind of just always goes under the radar. He's not mentioned on the same level as Mark and Pecco and Martin. He's just that other guy in many ways, but he should be, because he's finally starting to put a bit of momentum and rhythm together, which he didn't have the luxury of last year. And I watched that race, and with 7 laps to go, he was behind Maverick Vinales, and he was, I think at that stage, just over 4 seconds behind the leaders. He finished the race 2.2 seconds behind the leaders. And the last 3 or 4 laps, it was a 31-1, 31-1, 31-1. And the guy was just an absolute machine. I wish he didn't have, I think he got a long lap penalty, or he ran wide. There was something that disrupted his race. I can't remember what it was now. I made a note of it.
He got the long lap penalty because when he punted Aleix off the track.
Yeah.
Was it Aleix? Yeah. He took the shortcut over the...
Anyway, he got that penalty, which was detrimental to his race, because you look at it and the guy would have happily won the race, certainly top 2, top 3, and we know the beast is quite happy to throw it on the inside and make the move. So there's no problem there. So I enjoyed the Bastianini exercise again over Lamar, because he put his name in the hat. The problem is, you know, is it good enough? I think he is perfect for that second rider role in the Ducati team. We've spoken about it. I think he's the perfect professional to be there. You're going to get race wins. You're going to get great performances. You're going to get a championship contender in many ways. You know, I think he's still got to fully prove that in MotoGP, but this could be the season. And he's going to be a rider that's just going to play the game, you know, play the team game. If Ducati go with Martin and Bagnaia, that's going to be a whole nother conversation, is how do you manage that? How do you manage those two in the same team? And that. But anyway, the Bastianini exercise, very good this weekend. Once again, 4th best rider, is probably where he is at the moment. He's still in the championship hunt, You talk about the championship, we talk about Martin and Pecco more often than not. Marquez is in there, and Bastianini is still very much in there. And I think that exercise is just gonna carry on. I think the Bastianini exercise is gonna carry on. I do just worry there are these races where Bastianini just seems to not get things right, and he's just mid-pack. He's 6th or 7th or 8th, where that's not going to happen with Pecco and Martin, and that's the only kind of gripe I feel something inside me says is there with Enea Bastianini.
And also, Rob, I think part of the problem is, and it's a very, very broad statement to say this, it's easier, which we saw with Mark on Sunday, it's easier to race when you've got the pace, from a 2-second gap or 1.5 second, and you've got clear track in front of you and nobody hounding you. So all you have to concentrate on is hitting the brake marks, the apexes, and being smooth on the throttle. When you've got a guy trying to overtake you at every single corner, you're now concentrating on what you need to do and what he's going to do, where Bastianini had that advantage. So I hear what you're saying, and it's his style. He can obviously control, or he doesn't use the tire as much as some of the other guys in the first 2/3. But there's no point to, and I think he's fantastic and he's having a good season, but there's no point at the end of every race saying, yes, the last 5 laps, I was the fastest oak on the track. Because Martin's just going to turn around and say, yeah, but I got the winner's medal. I got the winner's medal. So the point I'm trying to make is, as good as he is, how good is he going to be when the pressure's all on him? When he's got Pecco, Martin, Mark Marquez, let's throw in Bezecchi if he doesn't fall over, De Gian Antonio on his back wheel, 4 laps to go, and they're racing for first, 3 or 4 of them. Then I think it becomes a different scenario. Not to take anything away from him, but those last 5 laps, he had clear track in front of him. He had nobody hounding him. I think it's a little bit easier to go faster than everyone else. And that's my point. He needs to get into the race and win 1 or 2. But to say, I was the fastest oak on the track in the last 5 laps, but I finished 4th. I'd rather be Martin and have the slowest lap of the race, but win, kind of scenario. So I think that's where he's got to get into the mix. Whether his qualifying has to improve or better starts. He didn't have the greatest of starts. Get in the mix, and then let's see how you go in the last 5 laps when those oaks are all over you like a cheap suit. It's a different kettle of fish there.
I agree with you.
It's off to him. He's riding superbly well.
Yeah, and I didn't take that into consideration, that kind of thought pattern of the 3 in front of him are racing against each other and waiting for someone to put a move on the inside. And there were a couple of moves put on where they lost time and stuff. So, but anyway, the pace is there from Bastianini. As you said, he's just got to put it a bit more where it counts, rather than this, having great pace and finish 4th. It's just not a good enough argument for him, especially if he wants to keep that factory right. Behind him in 5th place, Maverick Vinales, only 4 seconds off the pace. I was impressed with Maverick on the Aprilia this weekend, miles ahead of the rest of the Aprilias. For a long part of that race, as I said, with 7 laps to go, he was only 2 seconds behind that leading 3 bunch. I was impressed with Maverick again, on and off track. It's pretty much where the Aprilia is. There's going to be the weekends where Maverick just makes it shine, as he did a couple of weekends ago. But that's really where Aprilia is compared to Ducati. That 4 seconds over a 27-lap race is not a lot. It's a couple of tenths per lap. But 5th place, more championship points, more good, solid championship points. In a weekend where he was a little bit off the pace, but throughout the whole weekend showed good pace. I love how he interacted with the fans. I loved his conversations. There was a smiley, happy Maverick. There was just a good Maverick Vinales feel this weekend. And we've said it time and time again, if that Maverick comes out more often than not, there's no reason why we shouldn't be talking about him as a championship contender.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we said it, not the weekend of America where he was so dominant. Have they now said to him, and we don't know, and that's, I'll reiterate the point, that he's now the number 1 rider, and they are focusing on him as opposed to Aleix. That seems to be, because there's definitely been a change in Maverick, a mindset, an attitude. He looks happier. He looks more, he used to look very sullen. I've always said it. He used to look like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. Go back to Yamaha days, Suzuki days, it didn't make a difference. Even last year with Aprilia. But this year, definitely we're seeing a different Maverick. So I think the dynamic has changed. And it's certainly bringing out a better Maverick. And he had a great weekend. And as you say, I think it's the best that we're going to see of him, with the odd weekend like the US where he's going to dominate. I can't see him having another one of those weekends, but he's certainly going to be top 5, top 6 consistently.
Yeah, I think Catalunya coming up now is a track that he loves. I think the Aprilia works well there. We saw it with Lacia Spargra as well. So I think he's going to be a dark horse there to ruffle a few feathers. So I'm liking the Maverick Vinales Aprilia exercise, and I just hope it continues like that. I hope we continually seeing this happy, fast Maverick Vinales, because it just adds more entertainment to the series. In 6th place, another great ride from a rider that we're being forced to talk about kind of week in, week out. Now it's one that you've mentioned time and time again. I don't think I've really given him a little bit of time in the spotlight, but maybe not as much as I should. But certainly becoming a rider that you talk about more inside the top 10 more often than not. And he's, certainly looking at the start of the season, becoming the lead rider in this VR46 team, a rider that didn't have a MotoGP rider and was a sympathy signing in many ways. Fabio Di Giannantonio, and for a large part of that race, I mean, he was ahead of Marc Marquez for a long time. He pushed back at Marc Marquez. I love that tussle in the first chicane that he had with Marc Marquez. Didn't give up to him. Leading into the weekend, he already came out and said, Marc Marquez is no longer this alien. I used to look at Marc Marquez as an alien that I was nowhere near. I don't look at that anymore. And I think that's been the biggest change with a rider like Fabio. It's all this, we'll talk about Brad and that a little bit later, but Shez made a very good point messaging me on the week, and I love it now. Shez is fully into MotoGP and messaged me after every session. It's great. But he said, and we know this, an athlete's biggest kind of thing to play with is his mind, is his own mind. And I think for years, DJ Antonio's, he had great rides and that, but he was never winning championships or anything. So, yeah, I'm good, but I'm not as good as Mark and them, And I see this Fabio, even on his social media, it's, he's just found himself, and he's in this environment. We talk about these environments. He's found himself in this environment that he's absolutely loving. I think the team are loving him. I think that exercise is a lot better than they thought it was going to be from both sides. And he's producing the results. 6th place for Di Giannantonio. He also had a long lap penalty for cutting through the first chicane, but a brilliant ride, leading VL46 rider, 5th overall Ducati, 2nd of the old Ducatis. Doing everything right at the moment, Di Giannantonio.
Yeah, definitely. But you made a very valid point last year, Rob. Remember when he got pole position, then he finished 2nd or 3rd, I can't remember. Then the week after in Qatar, he won. And you said, yeah, it's great because Paul has been saying, I like the guy and I think he's good. And you were saying, yeah, but you can't be good for one weekend or even 2 weekends. I think what's happened with him now, he's grown into that confidence. He saw, remember, not last season, the year before, he got pole position. A lot of people won't remember this. He got pole position at Mugello. Yeah. Yes, it's a home race. But then I think he finished 98th in the race. He had a shocker. But he had got pole position. And I think he got the confidence for the pole position, and then he got drilled in the race. He was like, actually, I don't deserve to be here. Pole position. Last year, he took a big step. And the end of last year, and whether it was that desperation that he wanted a ride, he needed a ride, he had to prove himself. But I think he's matured into that confidence that now he gets to a weekend, and like you said, this weekend in the chicane, Mark, you pass me, I'll pass you back. Everyone else does it, why can't I do it? And now suddenly his mindset, he's saying, I actually do deserve to be here. And I think that's why he's also, I still agree with what you said last year and the beginning of this year. I don't see him as a championship winner, but he's certainly going to be in the mix. And every now and again, he's going to get a race win. But to see him consistently in the top 7 or 8 of a field as stacked as this, for a guy who, in effect, has had no results in his previous racing compared to some of the guys he's racing against, he's definitely, the confidence has clicked. The fact that he's beating Bezzecchi time and again also has to do in the world of confidence. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think he's only going to get better. I still agree with you. He's not going to win the championship, but he's in the mix. He's going to cause headaches for a lot of other people from time to time.
Behind him in 7th place, and I had to kind of blink twice here because I didn't even realize. I've watched the highlights 100 times, and I didn't even know Frankie Morbidelli finished in 7th place. I didn't know. Yeah. I'm looking at it now. So Frankie Morbidelli, 7th place, by far his best result, 9.8 seconds off the lead. That exercise is getting better. It's still a little bit inconsistent. He'll have a good session, a bad session, a good session. But that, looking at that now, as I said, I didn't even really make note of that. That's got to be massive confidence for Frankie on that Ducati. It's got to start turning, and we're going to start seeing this Frankie certainly inside the top 10 a lot more, creeping up slowly but surely closer to that top 5. The only problem with Frankie is he just seems to find himself in every single buster. He nearly got murdered by Jack Miller at Jerez. This weekend, Aleix Espargaro, we'll talk about him again, throwing his toys out the cot and wanting to murder him for a move that I thought was racing, especially at Le Mans, that kind of track that opens itself up to that. But Frankie just seems to be this irritating little guy that's always nipping at the heels of guys. But anyway, a really good ride from Frankie Morbidelli. As I said, you forget about him, but there he is now, starting to gain that confidence, starting to get the laps under his belt, and putting in a performance around a 27 lap race around Le Mans. I mean, I got tired and lost my mental state watching the race. For these guys to do that, what they did was spectacular. So big feather in the cap of Frankie there in 7th.
Yeah, and he missed all the preseason testing because he'd had that big crash and he couldn't do it. Seems like now he's settling down, remembering that he's also new to the bike. And he hasn't had as many days as Mark has had on it because he missed all the preseason testing. And they did say the test day was after Jerez. He was really impressive. Did, I think, the second most amount of laps. Seems to be knuckling down. But what I like about him is he says nothing. He just goes and races. Very seldom you hear him in the background with something to say. And it seems like he's got that within him that when his results show how talented he is, maybe then he'll have a back chat to Aleix Espargaro or to Jack for what happened. But until then, he's trying to do as well as he can and just get on the bike and ride and, keep his mouth shut. He's struggling as it is. I think he understands his ride is on the line. And instead of making a big hoo-ha about it, he's going to try and let his results show that he deserves to be there. And he's doing a good job. But the problem is, as you say, we didn't know he was in the race. The problem was the front 6, 5, 4, and then 3 made the race. So that was all the TV coverage we actually got to see, which a lot of people moan about, but that's what we want to see. So, do we want to see the Oaks racing for 12th, 13th, and 14th, even if they're having a good race where you got a race like that for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd? So, difficult one. They didn't give him too much TV time, but believe it or not, he was there.
He was absolutely there. Mariska Hutchinson, we can skip the man-child Aleix Espargaro conversation. I want to enjoy the rest of my Tuesday. We will skip it. All I'm going to say about Aleix Espargaro is, I think it was Moto News that posted on Facebook, who's a British guy who started his Facebook page, and a page I enjoy. And I think he got it spot on. I think Aleix has reached that time now. It's, you've done the most you're going to do in MotoGP. You're racing against younger, faster, hungrier guys. You're that old guy that's getting bullied in many ways, and you're saying you're getting bullied. You know what? Just hand the bike over to someone else next year. If I look at his brother Paul, and our Paul is thriving at life on his social media as this, broadcaster for DAZN TV and a test rider, he's just loving life. And that's what Aleix needs to do. Forget about this traveling and doing all of it. You don't need it. You got your family, you've made your money, you got your cars, your bikes, you've had a good run in it. Step aside now, because otherwise we're just going to get this guy. You want to love Aleix, and I do love Aleix. Then when I see those videos like after the race where he's tapping Morbidelli and shouting at him and then going to race control and saying this guy should have got a penalty, then I go, no, Aleix, please now, man. Please, you know what I mean? I'm enjoying the racing. The stewards aren't involved, and you're making them involved. Just get over it. So that's all I'm going to say about Aleix Espargaro, because there's a bigger topic to talk about. Unless you want to quickly say something about Aleix.
I do want to quickly say something. He's got a job for next year. He's going to be Jorge Martin's umbrella boy.
There we go.
So I believe that's done.
You see, done and done.
Sorted.
So there's a job. Okay, so he was in 9th, but let's talk about Brad Binder. This is a big topic, obviously, and Timothy Devi. What's happening with Brad Binder and KTM? As we just said, Rob, we require detailed talk on Brad and KTM. Had high hopes for Brad for 2024, especially after such a good start to the season, but now have a sad feeling Brad's championship hopes are already over. 3 crashes on Friday, so unlike Brad, it's a downward curve. Is it the Acosta pressure, or has Brad changed his riding style? There was no way Brad qualified last at Le Mans. That was unacceptable. Who is responsible for that qualifying, Brad or KTM? So let's talk Brad. This is a big topic, and there was a lot of conversation between myself and Shez over the weekend regarding Brad. Weekend started okay, and they had to kind of bounce back from what has been dismal performance or not good enough performances since the opening night at Qatar. Yes, he's had the injury that I don't think we fully knew the extent of that injury. I think it was a lot worse than Brad was playing it out to be, and that we certainly knew of. Picking apart the Le Mans weekend, I saw a couple of things. I saw Brad and Guidotti came out and said it perfectly to TNT TV in the interview he did after, I think it was after the Saturday, just before qualifying. And he said, Brad's overriding. Brad must just calm down. Brad is one of those riders that just wants to go out and just go absolutely crazy. Little Big Media. So what you're saying, Rob, is LA should retire and join race control. Please no. I saw a Brad that was overriding. They said his crashes in that final kind of two right-handers, they looked at the data and he was going in there faster than anyone. And listen, this is all everything that we've been communicated outside. As I said, what happens inside is a completely different story. There's two sides to every story. This is just how I see it and picking apart all the kind of little conversations that I've heard. I saw a Brad that was overriding. Now, whether that's a Brad overriding because of the pressure coming from Pedro Acosta, because he knows he needs results and he wants to get back to first, he's not happy finishing where he is in qualifying where he is. Brad wants to win races. Whether he's frustrated that KTM aren't finding the solutions to the problems that he's having, whatever it is, I saw a Brad overriding that KTM. I didn't see, Brad's normally a very aggressive rider and it shows in his riding style, but I saw a Brad that was overriding. He was overriding to what Brad normally rides, which is a hard thing to do. And those crashes were just from overriding and pushing too hard. That was the first concern that I saw. I enjoyed the fact that he brought it back and he was able to make something positive out of the weekend, a bit in the sprint, but more so in the main race on Sunday, which was great. The second biggest problem I saw, especially if you look at the Mark and the Gresini Ducati, they had problems throughout the weekend. They solved them and they got it right on Sunday. I'm hearing this conversation time and time again with the KTM team. We found something that's going to improve. We found something. But then we never see, or we see glimpses of this find something, but they're never able to continuously keep it going. And again, I saw this weekend where they started, and I use the word panic to Shares when I message them. I see a panicked team there with, they couldn't get the bike ready then for qualifying, which ruined his whole weekend in many ways because then it forced him into Q2 and. But I just felt this panic vibe watching through the TV from this KTM team that things just weren't working out. So you got this panicked team, you got this, panicked rider. It just all seemed panicked. And Guidotti's interview kind of gave me a little bit of solace in that, right, guys, calm down, trust ourselves, trust the process. And that's what happened. And that's what ultimately happened in Sunday's race. Coming from 22nd to 8th, listen, is no mean. That is spectacular in itself. I don't think, and only finishing 10 seconds off the lead. I think Brad lost that 10 seconds in the first 4 laps, with the traffic and at the start. Yeah. So the fact, if you actually, and I haven't been able to do a full race analysis, I think Brad had podium or top 5 pace, certainly, to finish 10 seconds off when you're starting, 4 seconds behind in 22nd place, in last place. And it is, as Mariska said, it's panicked fans. It's the whole Brad Binder and KTM conversation is panicked and desperate. And I think we all just need to go, hold on, trust Brad, trust the process. It is very frustrating. But I suppose the point I'm getting to is my biggest concern is that they're just not able to find solutions to the problem as quick as some other teams and riders. They come out and say, we found something. Is that just all smoke and mirrors? Because the results are in the pudding. And, people, we sing Brad's praises all along, but it comes back to that stats sheet that we talk about every week. And Brad has got to start putting results on the board. And that's exactly what Guidotti did. Guidotti said, we've got to start putting points on the board and results. They did it on Sunday, but more's got to come now.
There are 2 things that I'd like to mention about that, Rob. First of all, Friday has become so critical, and not Friday afternoon. Friday, the first time you roll onto the track to do a lap, you don't have, because of the sprint race cutting back time, you have to be ready for the sprint race. You've got to qualify. So Fridays become so important. Go back, not last year, the season before and time before that. Brad always took the whole of Friday, I felt, to settle into a race pace for Sunday. So he wasn't too concerned. Yeah, Saturday was important. And we know a few years back, the KTM didn't qualify, didn't have great 1 or 2 lap speed. But Brad was always setting the bike up for Sunday. Now the scenario has changed. From when you get on the track on Friday, you got to be as fast as you can go, whether it's a 1 lap pace. I know they use the afternoon session for the longer runs because it's an hour long, but you don't have time to be trying to figure things out. You just don't have the time because there's so much pressure. The times are so close now. So I think Friday, and I don't know if their team are looking at it slightly differently or if they haven't quite figured out exactly how to go about doing that, which is a stupid thing to say because he qualified so well in Qatar. But they seem to have lost that plot. So that's my first thing. Friday, for everybody, but I'm highlighting Brad because he didn't have a great Friday, has become critical. It's not a case of, what happens on Friday doesn't matter for Saturday. Friday sets up your whole weekend. The next thing is, we've said it all the time. It'll be great to have a fast rider in the KTM fold because they can compare data. Now, my concern is, are they trying to change things to do what Pedro Acosta's doing, and now they're losing their way? I don't know that. I'm just surmising because suddenly Brad seems to be lost. And as you say, they come out and say, yeah, we found something, but you can clearly see they found nothing in terms of Brad. They might have found something that's benefiting Pedro Acosta. And yes, he fell over in the main race. It's going to happen. But the kid is outshining Brad in qualifying. He goes straight into Q2. He's taking that pressure off himself. Now, I'm wondering, are KTM looking at his data and saying to Brad, no, but we think you must try this? I got no idea. But Brad can redeem himself on a Sunday. And this weekend was definitely an exception to Brad's normal riding, to be qualifying stone last. It just doesn't happen with him. So we got to, but we said it at Jerez, we said we're sweeping a bad race out under the carpet. We can't do it every weekend. Like we said with Bastianini, great to be fast, but you can't be finishing 4th and 6th and 7th. Yeah, Brad, from stone last to 8th, fantastic. Also throw in the mix, 3 guys in front of him fell. So was it actually an 11th? But that doesn't matter because remember, it benefited Pedro Acosta when he finished 2nd because Mark and Pecco had a crash. But Brad needs to sort out. I think they need to change whatever they're doing on a Friday to make sure when he goes into Friday afternoon session, he makes sure he's in the top 10. So he doesn't have to worry about going into Q1, Q2, which is going to happen from time to time. But they need to eliminate that stress, I think. Because we know on a Sunday, there are very few people that have the race demeanor of a Brad Binder. What doesn't really matter to him where he qualifies. Yes, we know how important it is, and so does he. When he puts that helmet on, that race face is a different kettle of fish altogether. But he can't keep doing this like 2 or 3 seasons ago when he was coming from 12th, 13th, 14th and getting good results. He needs to qualify well, which will allow him to finish well.
So Little Big Media says here, I'll say it again. The KTM is only the 3rd best bike on that grid at the moment. Is that frustrating? Is that frustration making Brad override? And in some ways, I agree with that. In some ways, I disagree with it because Pedro Acosta is kind of eliminating the fact that the bike can't do it. Whether that's frustrating Brad is that Pedro's doing it and I'm not. I think yes. I think in some ways we saw it last year when Jack climbed on the KTM and was outperforming Brad. The first, I said it all along. I was at Portimao and I saw this frustrated Brad that Jack was on the soft tire and he was doing things on the KTM that you weren't supposed to do. And Pedro Acosta's doing that now on the KTM. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I don't think they particularly have the answers at the moment as well, which is a bit frustrating. Jack had another dismal weekend. There were glimpses there. It just frustrates me that we found something. Yes, okay, they found something. But it's not that found something that the Ducatis and them have. And the Ducatis are able just to solve problems. We've seen it with Pecco time and time again when he's battling in one session and then all of a sudden he can find something. And that's obviously because they've got all this data to pull from. Martin's data, they've got a much bigger pool of data to pull from. And I like that thought process of what you're saying is this right, Brad? Look what Pedro's doing. Look what, is Brad saying, piss off, man. Are they focusing too much on that? Or do they need to just reset and go, right, lads, let's do what we do best. Let's do what we do. This is how I do my thing. This is how I want to ride the bike. Let's focus on that. And let's try and hone that in. And rather than doing this up, because it does seem, they've got two bikes and one's always completely differently set up to the other. And this is what caught them out in qualifying now, because, oh shit, number one bike's not working. Now you got to go on number two. But wait, it's completely different. Whereas, the Ducatis are, number one and number two are very similar. So are they just doing too much of this, or are they going too left and right and center? I don't know. There just seems to be this panic mode, and it just seems to be a little bit frustrating. Van Erasmus, for crying out loud, is every Friday brand new? Can that, what they have found, not be the start for the next race? Do they always have to find something new? Well, I understand what Van is saying there is, you hear Martin and Mark even coming out now, Pedro Costa saying, we kind of find a setup and we tweak it to what we like. And it always seems like Jack and Brad are going just all over the place from the outside. That's the kind of feeling that I get. And they do. Guidotti's kind of interview, as I said, just filled me with a little bit of confidence for them to say, you know what, guys? And it was aimed at Brad, but I think it was a general Brad side of the garage to say, right, guys, back off, trust yourselves, don't put this pressure. Brad, you're overriding. You're putting this pressure on yourself. You're overriding the bike. Brad Binder does not crash 3 times on a Friday. And he does not qualify in last place. I don't care who you are. It does not happen. Brad Binder is a top 5, top 3, top 2, top rider, no matter what. He's proven it. Everyone in that MotoGP paddock will agree with that. But they, as you said, it can't be this, okay, we found answers. We had great race pace, and then nothing happens the following weekend, and nothing happens the following weekend. That's what they need to sort out for us to really trust that the process is working. We had a glimpse of it at Qatar, where we all went, yes, championship. But even now, speaking to a couple of people, messaging them, and people's demeanor is, well, Brad's championship's already over. It's still a long way to go. But Jesus, you're not going to catch that many points up on the Pecos and the Martins. As we said, there's a mistake here and there in them, but not that many.
Yeah, and as we're saying, it's a long way to go. I think they're in panic mode. Whether it's because Brad seems to have lost his way and they're trying to rectify that, or whether they are saying, well, let's do what Pedro's doing. I think rightfully so. Take a step back. Let Brad be in control of what Brad needs to do. If he feels those are the changes he wants to make according to what he sees from Pedro's data, well, so be it. But if it's not, let Brad do what Brad does. He finished 3rd in the championship, or 4th in the championship last year. He certainly knows what he's doing. There's no doubt about that. But they seem to be lost. As you say, they keep saying they've made little, they found something. Gino Borsoi said with Jorge Martin, they make so little changes to his bike over the weekend and from week to week. Now, that to me shows how, first of all, we know how good the Ducati is, but they've got it dialed in for him. He's not changing week to week. Yes, the tracks change, so they make the adjustments that need to be made. Obviously, a faster track, they're going to make the bike a little bit longer. Tighter tracks, maybe a little bit shorter, whatever they need to do. But with Brad, it seems to be, from what we gather, up today, down tomorrow, exactly what you're saying. And I don't know, they need to regroup 100%. And I think another thing, I didn't see Pit Byra there this weekend. I'm presuming he wasn't there because generally they talk to him and they show him in the pits. I didn't see him. So maybe with him not being there, that's also the factor that they need, because he maybe just pulls all the different strings together and says, okay, boys, just calm down and, this is where we go. I'm not sure if he has that big an influence. I certainly believe he does. And tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you saw him at all on any of the footage, but I definitely didn't see anything showing him. And as I say, they always interview him and they always show him, but he wasn't. I don't believe he was in Le Mans.
Yeah, I don't know. Simon Crayford says, and I've said for a lot of time as well, we can't underestimate how much Jack's brought to the project. And, he's been a trial and error guy, and he's, approved a lot of things and disapproved a lot of things. And he's been a good exercise for KTM. And I still believe that. But then there's a part of me that also looks and goes, well, what benefit is he now? Certainly to a Brad. When he's looking across the garage and his teammates got no answers, crashing himself, not qualifying well, not really. Yeah, he's got Pedro Acosta, but it's not in the same environment. It's not in the same garage, not in the same colors. So in many ways, you kind of dismiss it. And I just don't know if, with Jack not performing, Brad not performing, if that environment, takes a toll. We've spoken about environments so many times. So yeah, someone mentioned reset, and I think that is a word that kind of fits and applies to this kind of exercise at the moment. And I think in many ways they did that for Sunday's sprint race, Sunday's main race, and it worked because it was a phenomenal ride. But Catalunya, good track. Brad loves it. Problem is, everyone loves it. It's again one of those tracks like Jerez that everyone can go well at. The KTM's gone well there before. There's 2 race weekends in a row, and I think this is the important factor. You've got to string. If you can string 2 good weekends in a row together, that kind of kicks off more motivation, more confidence. At the moment, confidence down. And as I was talking about, a rider's worst enemy is his own mind. And I think that came into play with Brad. I think it has. The confidence isn't there. He's had a tough time at it, There's confidence to be taken from Sunday. And the best thing when you've got confidence is to just keep coming. They talk with footballers. When you win, you just want to go play the next game and the next game. It's the same with racing. When you have a good result, you just want to go straight into the next weekend and the next one and the next one. It's when you have that crappy weekend, you go, okay, right, let's have a break and reset. So if Brad and KTM can spring together 2 good race weekends at 2 tracks that they should, I think it could be the turning point. Matthew Delgado, my 5 cents is that Brad is and will always be great. If he keeps on, Brad might move on to a team that brings the best out of him. This past weekend, KTM did not bring out his best. Yeah, and listen, and that's the point we can't forget, is that there's a superb world-class rider there that is strong mentally, that has been through a lot, that has proved himself. I don't think Brad needs to prove himself for the rider that he is. He needs to, him and KTM, and I think this is where we also get it wrong. We sometimes just label one or the other. They need to do it more often than that. They need to pull off more Qatars more often than not. Exactly like what we're saying with Bastianini, and that's the frustrating part. And what a lot of people do now is they cloud over the Qatar performance because they say, oh, well, he only got that result now because the others weren't ready. This is the true reflection on where Brad and KTM are. And I don't buy that. I don't think it is. I think it's just a case of a rider that's lacking confidence, a team that's lacking confidence, and they just need to turn it around. And if they can do that, we're off to the races again. The problem is they're having to go up against these Ducatis and these Marquez's and Martins and Pecos that are going 15 seconds faster than they did last year and putting in lap record pace every single lap. And they did it at Jerez 2 weekends ago and Le Mans again. So we talk about backing it up. Those guys have backed it up. And that's what all the riders are going up against. And it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, what you've just said now, Rob, what a valid point. You said 15 seconds faster. Brad was only 10 seconds behind him. So he was 5 seconds faster than last year's race winner. And he finished 8th and he started stone last. Yeah, so everybody's improved. We understand that. And obviously, whatever the new carcass on that front Michelin tire is, certainly seems to be doing the business. But I'm going to go back to what I think is the most critical part for them, Fridays. It can no longer be a day of, let's try this. Friday, you probably got, what is the first session's 45 minutes. You got 30 minutes there to fiddle, and then you got 15 minutes where you have to get your best pace, because Friday afternoon is so critical now. But yeah, they need to have a reset. There's absolutely no doubt. Whatever it is that they've changed in the last 2 weeks, Brad needs to take a step back, sit down, regroup. He doesn't have to prove to anyone whether he deserves to be there or not. There's no doubt about that. As you say, the package, so him, the bike, everybody need to come together if there is a bit of a disconnect there and settle down and show what they can do. They did it in Qatar. I don't buy the story that some people were ready, some weren't. The only one who might have had an excuse was Mark Marquez, reasonably new on the bike. Everybody else basically had been on the same equipment. So I don't buy that as an excuse. It could be, but it might be a valid point. I'm not deep downplaying that at all, but I think Brad got a result he deserved. No one was shocked. No one said, yes, look what Brad Binder did. Everybody was saying, well, Brad's thrown his hat into the championship ring immediately. But now he's kind of pulled it out a little bit. So we need him to get back to whatever that mindset, focus, team, effort, whatever was working then, the intensity, and bring that to the next 2 weeks. And there's absolutely no doubt he should be running top 5. Anything Pedro Acosta can do, Brad can do. Anything. There's no reason for him not to do that. Unless the pressure of Pedro Acosta is starting to get under his skin a little bit. That, to me, would be the only concern.
Yeah, let's talk about the Pedro Acosta conversation, because, I don't think we got to go through each and every single rider. We'll have plenty of time to do that over other kind of races. There was no real standout conversations. The Pedro Acosta one is because we saw the first rookie mistake, and he's allowed them. He's a rookie. They were going to happen. As star-studded as he is and as phenomenal as he is, he's a rookie at the end of the day. And a rookie mistake came out on Sunday's race because there was a rider, certainly I looked at as a top 5 contender, potentially a top 3, and he felt that, and hence why he made this mistake, because he wanted to go, and he came out afterwards and said, I wanted to go because I had the pace to win it, and I'm sorry to the team. But how we didn't take out elation, DJ Antonio, I don't know. But this was the first kind of little rookie crack that we saw from this phenomenon that is Pedro Acosta. Too early, full tank of fuel, overloaded the front, I think squeezing that brake because he saw the impact with elation, tucked the front, and down he went. But these are the kind of things that we've kind of have to grace Pedro in many ways, in his rookie season. But the fact still remains, from the first session just about, he was the quickest KTM. What amazes me with that guy is he rocks up to Le Mans, never been there on a MotoGP bike, and within 5 laps is kind of on the pace already. And you can't overlook that. Say what you want about it. And I know everyone goes on about why we're talking about Pedro Acosta. It's phenomenal what this kid's doing on this bike. But I think he got a little smack of reality that you're a rookie. You're in with the big boys now, and there's going to be these mistakes. But, I look at it, and it's frustrating for me to see, every session that this Pedro Acosta's just there and, on either ahead or on the heels of Brad, who's this established MotoGP rider. So that conversation of whether or not it's playing on the mind, it has to be.
It has to, absolutely.
It absolutely has to be. But I think that the Pedro Acosta, we're going to have these conversations week in, week out, whether he's up or down. But the Pedro conversation is certainly there now. And I saw it again. You look in that in the crowd, there's more and more Sharks and Pedro Acosta caps coming in. So certainly he's already making his mark on MotoGP and the kid's 19 years old.
No, absolutely. And he's a rookie. He's a rookie in MotoGP. It's only his 4th year, in Grand Prix motorcycle racing. He wasn't even born when Aleix was racing MotoGP, So that's the phenomenon that he is. The reason why we're taking it so personally is because if he was on a Ducati or an Aprilia, which we've mentioned before, it would be less of a, I'm going to use the word slap in the face to Brad, because it wouldn't be the same equipment, but it's reportedly exactly the same. So now when you look at the timing boards, or this is what I do, I start at the top, and the first thing I want to look for is Brad ahead of Pedro. I don't worry about anyone else. That's the first thing I'm looking at now. Because of this, he's fighting against the South African on a level playing field, and we don't like that. No. If he was on the Ducati, we'd be saying, he's got a better bike. If he was on the Honda, we'd be saying, look at Acosta, he's useless. But he's on the same equipment, and he's shining. There's no doubt. Give the boy credit. But saying that, he made a rookie mistake. It's going to happen. Remember, I said it after Qatar. After Qatar, they were all saying, he's got to learn how to conserve the tires. The next week, he had learned. So I can tell you one thing, Rob, be scared. Be very scared. Because he made his mistake now. Next weekend, I can't see him doing the same thing. He seems to be the most mature 19-year-old motorcycle racer in the world. So he's not just there to go as fast as he can. He's going to say, well, what did I do wrong? Okay, can't do that again because he got no points. He'll rather get a 10th than a nothing, even if he was running in 5th when he crashed or 4th. He wants to build up a championship, and that's the experience he needs. So I think watch him next weekend. We ain't going to see that mistake from him again. That's my opinion. I think he has that maturity that he just clicks. He knows what he has to do. He knows how to do it. And okay, that's what I can't do. And off we go again. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see him at Barcelona because, as you say, everybody loves it. It's a great track for racing. It always produces great races. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And unfortunately, Friday morning, first thing we're going to be looking for, Binder Acosta. So let's hope it's Binder on top.
Yeah. To end off that kind of Binder conversation, there's a very good question here from Martinez Lambrex, and it's one that always comes up, but I think it's gaining more traction now, especially with the rule changes coming in 2027. Brad's contract up at the end of 26, I think it is. Yeah. Is there a chance of Brad Binder going to another team? I always kind of dismissed it. I look at it now and I think, I look at the Marc Marquez exercise and I think in modern day MotoGP, it's not like the old days where you were doing and you stayed on a Honda because it was that much better. And I think these days, I think Brad should be exploring the options. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. I think it should assess at the end of his contract, or when he's certainly the year of he's the last year of his contract, and assess the situation. It's a hard one because you're going into a brand new development with the 2027 bikes, and I think Ducati will certainly be one of the more well-prepped ones. How many of them will be available? So there's a big conversation to have there. But for the first time now, I'm entertaining that question a little bit more of, right, Brad, KTM, thank you. And, will always be a big part in not only him, but in South African motorsport, to be honest. And if they can turn things around, great, stay. But if it carries on like this, I think Brad owes it to himself to see what the Brad Binder exercise would be like on another machine.
Yeah, I agree fully. Unfortunately, Brad is a typical South African. He's very loyal. So he's been very loyal to KTM. And it was a mutual decision to extend that contract, And at the time, I think a lot of people were quite surprised that he signed a 3-year deal, or I think it was a 3-year deal when he signed it. Does it not expire end of 2025? I can't remember. Anyway, it was a long-term thing, which no one was doing at the time. And I think a lot of people were quite concerned or surprised that he did that. But that's because he showed faith in KTM and vice versa. But I agree with you, Rob. I think it's going to get to a point where Brad is going to make the decision to be a world champion. And if the machine, and he's made that decision, I must rephrase that. He's made that decision. He thought he was in the best team with the best package. If he gets to the end of this contract and it's still clear that ain't going to happen, I think then 99% he'll be putting feelers out to possibly, if the Ducati is still the bike to be on, to jump ship. But his loyalty up till this point is fantastic. That's what the team wants. I mean, how long has he been with Red Bull KTM now? Since his 2nd or 3rd year in, I think, 2014 or 15. It's a 10-year history already. So you've also got to take that into account. It's a very difficult one, very difficult. And as you say, now suddenly, so let's just presume end of 2026, he jumps ship to Ducati, and KTM's new bike is the bike to be on. It's going to be such a difficult decision to make. I applaud Brad for sticking it out with KTM for the last 3 or 4 years when it wasn't the best bike. Absolutely. It's certainly better, but it's no Ducati. But he certainly never once has he said, yeah, this bike ain't doing so well. He's always found something, whether they have or not. He's always praised the team. He's always praised the factory. So you've got to give him credit for that. The problem is people want to see results, and we want to see him as world champion. And what is the change he has to make for that to happen? It's the $1 million question.
Yeah, I want to see the smile back on his face, because this weekend I saw it was the first kind of time we've really seen emotion in the pit box from Brad, where he was, he was very vocal with his demeanor and stuff. And, we saw the impact that the Honda had on Mark in his last remaining years there. I want to see that smiling Brad again. Wayne Taylor still said, even after the Sunday race, Brad's debrief was, yeah, certainly we made the best, and there's a lot of positives to take, but there's not this vibe, there's not this excited to go racing Brad, and I want to see that again, and I hope him and KTM can work it out. There was a comment here from someone about 2027 being a level playing field. It will be, but Ducati just seem to have the Gigi factor that just seem to have something better, and are KTM going to go with WP suspension again, and is that going to be hampering? We've seen how it's hampering Moto2, so it clearly is a factor. It clearly is, because it's proving it in Moto2. So I don't know. I just want Brad to be happy. Is kind of what I'm saying, and I know he is happy where he is. He's not happy where he's finishing. He wants to take KTM and win the championship for KTM. That's the loyalty that he was. That's a South African in him that he wants to do. I just didn't see a happy Brad this weekend. I haven't seen a happy Brad for a couple of weekends now, and I just want to see a happy Brad enjoying, loving what he does best as one of the best riders in the world. So whatever that takes, whether it is staying with KTM or moving, I just want to see a happy Brad Binder as a fan, as a friend, as a whatever you want to call. That's what I want to see. So let's wait and see what happens there. And like a lot of people say, it's easy for us to say, oh, Ducati will want him at the end of 2026 or 27. He's going to be 30, 31 years old. There's these, youngsters coming from Moto3 that are coming up. It's not going to be as clear cut as, well, Brad's not signing with KTM anymore. Right? Who wants me? I don't think it's as simple as that. So there's a lot to be said for that whole conversation. Moving to the other Binder to end off, and someone asked about AJ Fenter, deep sea dive. I think we'll have next week, Tuesday, maybe. I'm going to try and get hold of AJ that we can talk about his Northwest 200, where he was the fastest best newcomer. Talk about his Ironman TT, that's coming up, and talk about his involvement with KJ Mognaniana in the Red Bull Rookies Cup. So there's a great conversation piece to have there with the AJ Fenter, which I'll try and set up for next week, Tuesday, being that there's no talking MotoGP or talking AJ Fenter. But let's talk Darren Binder. Again, another big conversation. Torrid, horrible, terrible start to the season. Nothing's clicking, nothing's working. There's just something wrong there. Weekend and start off great again, 22nd, 24th, and I can't stand it when I open Moto2, and I'm normally like 5-10 minutes late into Moto2, and then I look and I've got to scroll. It's my worst when I have to scroll to see Darren's name. I hate it because it's not Darren. Darren should not be there. Anyway, positives to take from this weekend. Look like they found something certainly over race distance. There's certainly an handbrake there still. If you look at Jake Dixon, just nowhere. The WP suspension bikes are just really battling. It was the first time a Kellex wasn't on the podium. Credit to Boscoscuro. But anyway, Darren, there was certainly a bit more of an improvement. The only thing that frustrated me was he got ahead of his teammate, and his teammate bombed him on the last lap or somewhere to beat him. And that was like, if he had just managed to beat his teammate, that would have really been the icing on the cake for Darren. Anyway, he heads now to Catalunya, a track that he loves, a track that he knows well, a track that he's gone fast at before. He won his first Moto3 race there, blah. So let's just hope that confidence now and whatever the team found can just filter its way in there. But there seems to be, this WP suspension conversation that's very frustrating. And it's just going to carry on as long as those results don't come. So I don't know. But again, we spoke about it last time. How many cards does Darren still have in Moto2? How much time does Darren still have? Listen, he was ahead of a lot of big names in that race, on Sunday, which was again a positive that I took. But how long does Moto2 wait for Darren Binder? So it's giddy up time in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, just talking about his teammate, if I remember correctly, didn't his teammate qualify about 8th?
Yeah.
Or 10?
Senna Aegis was, and he got, I think it was 8th, and then he got a bomber of a start. He was up to like
4. Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. So Darren actually had a great ride, because I was watching, and obviously they didn't show any of him, but watching on the timing screen, and he has 18th, 16th, 15th, 14th. So he's definitely going very hard. Disappointed. I think he got into 12th at one point.
Yes,
The important thing for me, he was in the points and he finished. Because
absolutely.
Darren's had the tendency that when he's got into the points, and I think he gets so excited that he's just passing all these guys and then he makes a mistake. He
Yeah.
didn't do that. So I think that is point number one. It was great that he brought the bike home in the points. Just to mention, he's got 3 points, which is not great. You know how many points Jake Dixon's got? A big fat 0. So karma. And I hate bringing up Jake Dixon, but that just makes me so happy. So yeah, I think good for Darren. Yeah, he needed to beat his teammate, but from where he qualified to where he finished versus his teammate, I think a great result. And maybe they have found a little something that just buys them a little confidence. And yeah, let's see next weekend. Great track. I think one of the best for racing. In fact, the next 2. I've been to both Barcelona and Mugello, and they are absolutely magnificent. I've always said fast tracks create good racing. So yeah, let's have a look. I think it's going to be a fantastic.
They are, from personal experience, they are 2 of the, man, they're just epic to be there. But a lot of people asking, Rob, why is Darren suffering and whatever. Let's put this into perspective. So there's the IO Moto2 team who has dominated Moto2 for so long. They've now got Dennis Onchu and Celestino Vietti. 2 good names. Onchu very fast in Moto3. Vietti, a Moto2 race winner. Established good riders. That team's also made the move to WP suspension, being KTM branded and Onchu has not featured anywhere. Darren beat him. He finished 18th in the race. Vietti, non-starter again with his injury. Vietti hasn't done anything. So the WP argument or excuse is a big, valid excuse for Darren Binder. And if I look at it now, he was ahead of Marco Ramirez. He was ahead of Jabal Masia, Moto3 World Champion, ahead of Jake Dixon, who's touted to go to MotoGP, ahead of Onchu, ahead of Foggia, ahead of, Mazzaro was a previous winner, ahead of Sasaki, Moto3 contender. So there was a lot of positives to take there from Darren. But, up till now, I kind of accepted the WP as an excuse. But the more I dived into it, especially this weekend, I went, it's a big problem. In that Moto2 class, that WP suspension is a huge problem. Thrown in with the Pirelli. So it's 2 brand new factors that have been thrown the way of Darren and a couple of the other riders. I think if Darren had a second, so this is kind of not fair. Darren had a tough first year. I know that. And there was some down to his own failings and there was some down to rookie and blah, 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 blah. Then you go ruffle the whole feathers, right? Your second season, now it's time to gain momentum. Oh, by the way, you're starting with Pirelli tires and WP suspension, which we as a team also have to learn. You know what I mean? So I know it sounds like an excuse as a fanboy and whatever, but to me, it's valid and justified because if I look at the other riders, it's the reality.
Yeah. You can't argue the point, Rob. And until we get someone from Darren's team to tell us otherwise, I think that has to be part and parcel of their non-step forward. It just seems like that. I mean, look at Jake Dixon. In all fairness, he's a quality rider. Love him or hate him, irrespective. He's a quality rider. I mean, last year he won races. He was consistently in the top 5 or 6. He hasn't got a single point. Yes, we know he had a big crash, but is that a result of the 2 changes, the suspension and the tires, and now you need to adapt? You're so used to what you've done in the past. It's a very difficult one. And you know me, I've been mentioning it with regards to the factory KTMs. I think that's the limiting factor. Öhlins for, I don't know, probably the last 20 years have been the leaders in suspension technology. Now you're changing something, and I'm presuming to go to WP with Darren's team, money was involved. So unfortunately, you need the money to run the team, but now it sets you back maybe. So it's such a catch-22, especially for the teams that don't have unlimited budgets, where they've got to make sure that they're getting people to pay the money that they need so they can run their teams. It's a difficult one, but but at least a better weekend for Darren than what we've seen in the last couple.
Yeah, it's their whole team. Yeah, absolutely. Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. For both of them, it was a good weekend for the team, which was great to see. Timothy asked a question, Rob, any updates on Darren's 2025 ride? Timothy, I kind of just answered it. I do worry. I do worry because the results aren't there. I hope and I'm confident that Darren will pull results together and worst case, potentially stay with the current team or hopefully find himself maybe on a Boscoscuro chassis with Öhlins suspension, because that seems to be the way. I do think, you know, in that field of Moto2 riders, Darren's still one of the better names, if you know what I mean. And I think there are a couple of really fast Moto3 riders coming up that could halt a good ride for Darren. I think if he can string together a couple of good results, you know, teams look at the bigger picture. They know there's a talent in Darren Binder. Then they look at what he did in MotoGP. Yeah, the results were there, but they look at the speed that he had, the times, and the speed that he's shown, and they know there's a good rider in there. And on a competitive package, he will show himself. So he's got that going for him. It's just a case of, yeah, how many bikes are available, and if teams want to go and take the Darren Binder exercise on. So fingers crossed they will. I'm pretty sure, and I'm confident that he will be able to pull some results out the head for the rest of the season, and we'll get it sorted. So Little Big Media Co., I like your suggestion. Let's crowdfund and raise money to buy Öhlins suspension for KTM. I think I would love,
if only it was that easy.
yeah, I would just love to see the exercise. I know we talk about Brad jumping ship and the Mark exercise. I wonder if KTM have done that exercise of, you know what, let's just bang some Öhlins suspension on Danny Pedrosa's test bike. Let's just see. You know, surely they've got to be doing it. You know, surely you've got to be comparing that to see the data.
Yeah, I don't know, Rob. What do they do?
Yeah, I know. What do you do? But
are they going to go buy a set of Öhlins over the counter? It's definitely not what Pecco Bagnaia has on his bike. Because as far as I know, you cannot buy those forks with the carbon stanchions.
You lease them. No, you lease them.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't. But they're not an Öhlins sponsored team, so they can't phone Öhlins. What's his name, Stig Larsson, and say, "Listen, just send us a couple of forks." He's going to say, "Boys, have a nice day." You know, so yeah, very difficult one. Yeah, but in the perfect world, it would be fantastic if Danny could phone Cal Crutchlow and say, when you're testing, just throw your forks on my bike for the weekend and let's see how it goes. You know, or Bradle or whoever. Yeah,
it would be a great exercise to see. So anyway, yeah, Michael Voleslis, yeah, haven't WP employed Öhlins technicians? Yeah, absolutely, but KTM have employed Ducati technicians. If the structure, the hardware is different, if the makeup of it's different, doesn't matter who you are. If it's not built, or Öhlins, I don't know what it is, but suspension to me is suspension. It's, you know, little O-rings and tubes, and you know, how different can it be? And springs, but there's a difference. You know, it's Coke and Pepsi. It's sparkling flavored, you know, carbonated, but one tastes a lot better than the other.
Rob, just on that note, did you have any luck getting hold of Martin Petzold? Did anyone speak to him?
No, not yet. Nicole Brett said she did message him. I don't think she's had any luck just yet, but it is one that, you know, worst case, I'll just get old Ricky Moraes on the phone. You know, I know.
Or Ricky, just, you know, give us an idea of what could the differences be. You know, because besides the carbon stanchions, which I'm sure KTM, if they don't have them, they could make them if they needed to. You know, but internally, could there be such a difference? I don't know. I firmly believe that's part of the problem, but maybe someone like Ricky will come on and say, no, the difference is negligible. But remember, here we're talking 1 or 2 tenths of a second per lap. We're not talking 3 seconds, you know. So, yeah, it would be interesting. Maybe Ricky's the guy to tell us.
Yeah, I think 2027, they all just need to go Öhlins suspension. Every bike just has to have Öhlins.
Yeah, make it compulsory.
Paul, great chat with you. Big thanks to everyone in the comments for all your input and comments. It's always fantastic to have, you know, so many minds going at it. As you know, the saying is 10 heads are better than one. In this case, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of heads are better than 2. But it's been great to have the chat as always, and I look forward to 2 race weekends in a row. And as you said, Catalan and Mugello, it just doesn't get any better. I think the championship is just perfectly hyped up at the moment, with not only the off-track stuff of who's going where, but on-track of just these gladiators, all of them just putting on just such a display of skill, technique, motivation, determination, mental strength, just everything. We're truly being exposed to the best motorcycle racing that there ever has been, and it's a great era to be a part of and have these kind of discussions. And long may it live, and really look forward to a couple of weeks' time when we're talking MotoGP Catalunya.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Yeah, it's been fantastic. To everybody who tuned in, thank you very much. And 2 weeks' time, we'll be discussing the results of one of the best races of the year.
I firmly agree with you. Stay tuned. I'll message AJ Fenter straight after this to try and have a catch up with him next week, Tuesday. I'll definitely have the conversation with Ricky Moraes to get him potentially on the Catalunya show, just for, a couple of minutes to quickly tell us what he thinks, pulling apart his years and years of experience as a technician and a crew chief, on what he thinks, the differences could be. And yeah, listen, a guy like Ricky Moraes, to extract anything from him, there's a wealth of knowledge there. So we'll definitely try and see what we can get from him and just carry on the conversation. So until then, everybody have a great week. Enjoy the rest of it. And until talking MotoGP Catalunya, or next week, Tuesday, where we talk Northwest 200 and TT stuff with AJ Fenter, just be safe, stay healthy, and just be happy.
Lekker. Cool, man. Rob, thank you very much.
Goodbye.